What you're about to watch isn't just another heated exchange in Washington. It's a moment that exposes something deeper inside American government, the quiet war over who actually gets to govern. Because the real question here isn't whether you like or dislike a president. It's whether unelected judges should be able to shut down national policy for the entire country with a single ruling. And when political power changes hands, do the principles stay the same or do they suddenly evolve? But let's confront the reality head-on. If the standard shifts depending on who sits behind the resolute desk, then we don't have consistent law. We have a rotating set of excuses. Watch closely, because what happens next shows you exactly why this isn't just about Trump or Biden. It's about whether elections still mean what we think they mean.
Here, Professor Shaw, nice to see you again. Let me just start with you, if I could, Professor Shaw. You talked about the fact that there have been lots of rulings against the Trump administration. That's absolutely statistically true. I disagree with almost all of them. In fact, I think all of them. But the issue of this hearing really isn't the rulings, is it? It's the remedies. Would you agree? And those are distinct things. You may think that the ruling is quite correct, but that's actually not what we're talking about here today. We could have a hearing on that. Maybe we should. But we're talking today about the remedy. And the question is a remedy that binds parties who are not before the court, is that an appropriate thing? I mean, aren't you concerned about judges binding non-parties in their remedies? You may love the ruling, but even if you do, don't you think it's a little bit anomalous for courts to be going out there and binding parties who are not before them? I mean, is that something we want to encourage?
Senator, I think that judges have been issuing rulings that impact non-parties since Marbury versus Madison, right?
So you're not concerned about it?
I'm not. I absolutely think that they can be abused, and they have been abused.
Wait a minute. You were very concerned about it just a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
You said in response to a nationwide injunction on the Biden FDA's mifepristone rules, and I quote, "This injunction's a travesty for principles of democracy, notions of judicial impartiality, and the rule of law."
I think I've been consistent today. That was issued by Judge Kaczmarek in a single judge division. They're a problem. Those are a problem.
With him personally? Wait,
no.
So your testimony is if it's issued by Judge Kaczmarek, it's bad?
No, sir.
It's personal?
That is not my testimony.
So is the problem with the injunction? You were criticizing the universal injunction here.
Issued by a judge in a single judge division. I've been very clear today that those are a problem.
By a Republican judge in a Republican division, then it's bad.
No, Senator.
Otherwise, it's fine.
No, Senator. I think that single judge divisions are a problem.
What is the principal difference? I'm looking for a principle. I understand you hate the president. I understand you love all of these rulings against him. You and I both know that's not a principle. You're a lawyer. What's the principle that divides when issuing a nationwide injunction is okay when it's not? When the Biden administration was subject to nationwide injunctions, you said that they were travesties for the principle of democracy. You didn't say the referral to Judge Kaczmarek was a travesty. You said his injunction was a travesty for principles of democracy. Yeah. So, in other words, the translation is just you didn't like the outcome. Is that right?
No, Senator. Look, we're talking about, I don't think Article 3 precludes this form of relief. So we are talking about prudential considerations.
Prudential meaning political?
No.
Then give me, so far I have yet to hear it. You've been questioned by multiple senators. I have yet to hear a principle other than the fact when you like the ruling, you think it's great to apply it nationally, including non-parties. When you don't like the ruling, it is a travesty for the principles of democracy, notions of judicial impartiality, and the rule of law.
Look, Senator, I'll say I think I am self-aware enough to know that my view of the underlying legal question, I am sure colors my perception of the remedy. I think that we should all acknowledge that. And yet I do think
that why shouldn't we stop nationwide injunctions for everybody?
I think that's
what we're talking about today.
Because I'm not willing to leave without relief non-parties who are
injured.
No,
you're not willing to leave without the ability to bind President Trump.
No, I
right?
think that...
I mean, when it's Biden, it's okay. No. When it's Biden, it's a travesty. When it's Trump in office, it's no holds barred, whatever it takes, right?
I believe in a powerful...
What was it that President Biden's staff said? We've got to do undemocratic, unconstitutional things to save democracy. Why is this the same
I believe
thing?
In a powerful president. I do believe in presidential power, but power and constraint are not at fundamental odds.
What is the principle?
Power.
What is the principle? The legal principle. You've referenced prudence. You've referenced the judges you don't like. What's the principle of when an injunction binding non-parties, which was never done in this country before the 1960s? And let's see the chart, the Trump chart, which was done really only once Trump came into office for the first time. You don't think this is a little bit anomalous? You don't think that's a little bit strange?
A very plausible explanation, Senator, you have to consider is that he is engaged in much more lawless activity than other presidents, right?
You don't think
you must
this
concede that
was
is a
never
possibility.
used before the 1960s, and suddenly Democrat judges decide we love the nationwide injunction, and then when Biden comes to office, no, actually.
It's Republican appointees as well, Senator.
No,
and the 1960s is where some scholars begin, sort of locate the beginning
Can you
of this.
identify
But
one
others,
before then?
Mila Sahoni, who's another scholar of universal injunction, suggests 1913 is actually the first. There were others in the 20s.
The Republic endured for 150 years before there was a nationwide injunction.
Well, the federal government was doing a lot less until 100 years ago. So there's many things that have changed in the last 100 or the last 50 years.
So long as it is a Democrat president in office, then we should have no nationwide injunctions. If it's a Republican president, then this is absolutely fine, warranted, and called for. How can our system of law survive on those principles, Professor?
I think a system in which there are no meaningful constraints on the president is a very dangerous system of law.
That's not what you thought when Joe Biden. That is not what you thought when Joe Biden was
every president
You
is
said that is
constrained
not what
and
you
must
said.
be.
You said it was a travesty for the principles of democracy, notions of judicial impartiality, and the rule of law. You also said
the Supreme Court senator agreed
9-0
with me on that.
You also
case,
said when Joe Biden was president, you said the idea that anyone would foreign shop to get a judge who would issue a nationwide injunction was just judges looking like politicians in robes. Again, it threatened the underlying legal system. People just trying to get the result they wanted. It was a travesty for the rule of law. But you're fine with all of that if it's getting the result that you want.
Sir, the Supreme Court agreed unanimously with me in that case, right? There was no standing. The case should never have been allowed to proceed. And the combination of parties without standing and the single-judge division.
No. We're talking. No, they did not. They did not issue a ruling on the nationwide injunction. You criticized the injunction nationwide. Listen,
issued in a case where no one had standing.
Here's the thing. We've now gone 6 minutes and
that exchange wasn't just tense. It was a diagnostic test for the American system. And it exposed the disease. Selective outrage dressed up as constitutional principle. Senator Hawley kept asking one question that should be easy for any serious legal mind. What is the principle? Not the outcome. Not your feelings about the president. Not whether you think the policy is wise or stupid. The principle that tells us when a single district judge should be allowed to bind the entire country, including people who never stepped into that courtroom. And notice what happened when the pressure tightened. The conversation kept sliding away from a clean rule and into a moving target. This judge is a problem. That division is a problem. This case is different. That context matters. Maybe some of that is true, but the public isn't blind. Americans can sense when the argument is really, I like this injunction when it stops the administration I fear, and I hate it when it stops the administration I support. That's not jurisprudence. That's politics in a robe. And here's the part that should make you pause. The moment Professor Shaw essentially concedes that the underlying legal question colors her view of the remedy. That admission may be honest, but it's also devastating. Because if your view of the remedy depends on whether you think the president is righteous or reckless, then the remedy isn't neutral. It's a tool, and tools get used. Now let's be fair. Courts exist to restrain power. That's not controversial. The president is not a king. The Constitution is not optional, but restraint has to be consistent or it becomes sabotage. If every new administration can be frozen nationwide by a single judge in a single district, then elections start to matter less because policy isn't being decided by voters and their representatives. It's being decided by whoever wins the courthouse lottery. You don't need to be a lawyer to understand why that's dangerous. It turns the judiciary from an umpire into a veto point. And it invites both sides to escalate. And what did we hear in that clip? We heard a debate that should have stayed procedural, get dragged back into raw political moralizing. I understand you hate the president. A plausible explanation is he's more lawless than other presidents. Those are not careful legal standards. Those are character indictments. And once character indictments become the operating logic, the legal system stops being a system and becomes a battlefield. This is why the history matters. Nationwide injunctions were not the norm for most of American history. Whatever date you pick for their rise, the point is the same. This is a modern habit that expanded alongside a federal government that expanded into nearly everything. So, of course, conflict increases. But the question isn't whether conflict exists. The question is whether we're going to formalize a practice where one judge can effectively govern the whole country by injunction, while everyone pretends it's merely applying the law. Because if that's the future, then judicial nominations become even more apocalyptic. Judge shopping becomes rational, and the public's trust collapses. Not because people are anti-court, but because people are anti-double standard. So here's the bottom line. If your principle is nationwide injunctions are a travesty when they block your side, but a necessary safeguard when they block the other side, you're not defending the rule of law. You're defending the rule of your team, and a republic cannot survive long on that logic. The only way out is consistency. Either these sweeping remedies are extraordinary and rare for everyone, or they're normal for everyone. But you don't get to call it tyranny on Monday and call it democracy on Friday. If you want more breakdowns like this, subscribe, share this video, and tell me in the comments. Should any single district judge have the power to halt national policy for the entire country?